Hello everyone and welcome to a different kind of video for my YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about the graphic novel X-Men God Loves Man Kills by Chris Claremont. Just to preface this, I genuinely don't have a lot of experience when it comes to Marvel or superhero comics even in general. And I do think I would be open to the idea of doing live streams, so Jada talks about Marvel comics in the future. But I thought for this specific story, I would just do a video instead because it is comparatively short if you look at the other stories that we usually do on live streams here. Um, so yeah, I'm just gonna do a quick video about this. Go once again chapter by chapter, although there are of course much fewer this time, and share my thoughts with you. So let's just start generally. I have to say I really was a fan of the art style. I liked how the characters looked. I liked how the environment looked. It is a nice look, and I do understand that even though I'm not quite used to that, I know that from manga that art style can really be a deal breaker, at least when it's very extreme. And I thought this art style was pretty nice here. And yeah, the story in the prologue, it starts pretty aggressive already. We get introduced to two siblings. They're called Mark and Jill. It's obvious that these children are mutants. They are being hunted down by henchmen of the villain of the story, who is Reverend Stryker. So if you've seen the Fox movies, the name Stryker obviously does ring a bell for you, even if you haven't read any X-Men comics in your life. And yeah, they get killed, which is, I mean, you don't see them explicitly get shot, but you see the corpses. They're even strung up on a swing to just hang there after they've been killed, which is, yeah, it's quite the gritty, the violent and dark introduction to the series, or to this mini series, let's say. And it paints a nice picture of what is to come. Of course, it's not nice to see that panel, but it does give you a feeling of, okay, this is a serious story. Like it's going to be about serious stuff. And it's not like there's no levity throughout this book, but you get that it's a more serious story, generally speaking. You even get introduced to Magneto. Magneto, once again, for someone like me who only really has X-Men experience with the Fox movies and a bit of the animated series, seeing Magneto as not really a villain was kind of surprising and refreshing, but in a good kind of way. So I actually liked Magneto in this storyline. I might even like him most out of all characters. He is more of an anti-hero, I guess would be a somewhat fair term to use here. And yeah, you just of course, see these corpses and him being like, well, you know, you know how Magneto is. Magneto is more of an action kind of guy who would rather just use violence to ensure the safety of mutant kind, whereas, Charles Xavier obviously being the one who would rather talk to them. And yeah, Magneto seeing these corpses definitely did not help him in staying more peaceful here, and that's going to be set up for him later. We get introduced to Kitty Pryde. She also has a pretty nice story throughout this book. She gets introduced while having a fight with someone, with some dude. He even uses words like mutant friend, so obviously kind of shunning the idea of being friendly to mutants at all. Her friends are even trying to be understanding towards him, saying like, oh, hey, he doesn't mean it like that, or like, he's just a drunk idiot, let him be. And it's interesting because one of those friends of Kitty is black, and Kitty asks like, oh, if he called me a nigger friend instead of a mutant friend, would you have accepted his words so easily as you do right now? And even her friend, like, the others are like, hey, calm down, no need to be so aggressive. But the friend of Kitty specifically is like, yeah, I'm kind of mad because she's actually right. I probably would have reacted differently there. That was a nice scene because, yeah, Kitty is not someone who wants to just accept being treated as mutants are generally treated in society, which is a very nice touch for her. Yeah, and as far as I can tell, once again, very limited knowledge. I'm gonna start getting into my deep dive of Claremont X-Men specifically, but I have not a lot of experience with any of the characters. But I mean, these characters are sort of known, let's say, in a general pop culture. And as far as I know, at least, they seem pretty in character. So specifically, I said Wolverine. That they have like team exercises, and Wolverine is kind of not taking it seriously that much. He's being, his kind of usual dickish self, and I like him. I mean, he's not a big part of the story by any means, but he seems to be as people remember Logan to be. And Charles Xavier, of course, Professor X, being a very optimistic, a very friendly kind of guy. He wants to build bridges specifically with humans because he feels like as though this is the correct way of ensuring the future, the peaceful future for mutant kind, which, for what we know about Professor X, perfectly makes sense for him. Yeah, as I mentioned, the training sequence, it was a pretty cool way of just quickly, if you don't know anything about X-Men, introducing you to all the powers at work. So we specifically have Ariel using her ability to go through objects, and she uses that ability to her advantage. There's attack robots that are trying, of course, to beat them, and she manages to go through these robots and disable them like that, or she disables the target system of a rocket, so that's kind of an interesting way just to show you quickly what these characters are supposed to do in a fight. And yeah, we very quickly increase the action by seeing apparently Charles, Storm, and Cyclops dying from an attack. I was already like, I can't quite believe that 3 very, very prominent X-Men characters are just killed off in the first chapter. Of course, in the end, it did not actually happen, but it was nice, seeing this fake out deaths. And it's also kind of interesting seeing like, oh, okay, here's a little break now for this chapter, and the next chapter starts off and deals with the aftermath of that. Chapter 2, we have a little interaction between Kitty and Ilyana. It's a pretty nice interaction just between them. It seemed to be clear to me that to some extent Kitty has feelings with Colossus, which, as I said, I can't quite comment on that. I don't have the vast knowledge from Marvel Comics to tell whether that makes sense that she has this, but it was a genuinely sweet little moment right there. So I just have to say that I liked it. Yeah, and then the characters find a camera that's spying on the mansion of the X-Men. And what she does is she disables this kind of camera with her powers. So Kitty does that, and they wait for the people to arrive who are apparently spying on them to see who they are. Then there's another action scene. A car is trying to escape, and Colossus actually throws himself in front of it, which is just, Colossus being like the kind of very upright, upstanding, nice type of hero, at least from the little I also know him from, which is really, I think, only the Deadpool movies and now this graphic novel. It's like, yeah, makes perfect sense. He's trying to keep the car from driving into civilians, so he's literally throwing everything in his way. Of course, Colossus having the powers that he has also helps him with that. But yeah, I like that story. Yeah, so Kitty and Ilyana, who are waiting for the owners of the cameras to arrive. Ilyana gets captured, which unfortunately was to be expected. If you look at the panel, they were very close to the camera, so they were eventually found out. Ilyana gets captured. She gets moved into the trunk of the car of the kidnappers. Kitty uses her powers to go through objects to follow her into the trunk of the car, which then senses a security breach, I assume, because it senses another life form in the car that isn't supposed to enter there right now, which I guess makes sense. And it tries to stun her with nerve gas. Yeah, and as we later see, I was here at that moment, I was like, I don't know. The fact that she can make herself be intouchable should probably somewhat counter her ability to be stunned by nerve gas. And we then later see in the next chapter how that gets paid off. So we're gonna just leave that thought for now. Then we actually get something interesting. So that was surprising to me. We get Magneto. Now Magneto helps Wolverine and Colossus attack the people who attacked them first. He's even killing one of them who's not cooperating with them. I was about to say I would actually have kind of liked if Magneto had tried to question him more, but Magneto being a more ruthless kind of guy who does not hesitate to just dispose of an enemy, I was thinking, okay, I guess that makes sense, but still, I think I would have liked him trying to question him a bit more. Nightcrawler even has an interesting thought here. It's like he's asking himself whether they are any better than them, so like the followers of Reverend Stryker, if they just act the same, which is kind of, ruthlessly kill them. For me, I would say it's a pretty definitive yes, because the actions, of course, are not comparable at all. One of those actions is coming from a place of self-defense, whereas the people of Reverend Stryker, of course, from their perspective, are also on the defense, but actually objectively are on the offense. But if you consider the reputation that mutants have in this universe, it makes sense that he would be a bit more careful about acting too rashly, even though they would obviously say that they are in the right. And for now, we just get the setup that Stryker once, in some capacity, used Charles' powers for his own benefit. For now, that's just the setup we have, and that's going to get paid off in the following chapters. Chapter 3, we get very, very bizarre but incredibly cool imagery, which is that we see a sequence of Charles being apparently crucified in what looks like to be the World Trade Center. I mean, the panel does say it, and I assume they are actually inside of it. We get a pretty cool looking torture scene, torture slash nightmare scene, where we even see the evil or the fucked up versions of other X-Men, which is just a genuinely great thing to experience. And it even communicates a lot about Charles, because you see actually into his mind and how much it means to him to keep the X-Men alive and the mutants alive, and how much it actually pains him to even imagine seeing all of them as an evil version of themselves. Even someone like who have their dark sides like Wolverine, even then he would be very pained. And it's a nice insight into Charles' character. Yeah, we get Stryker's backstory about why exactly he is that crazy about killing. So we see that Stryker, at some point in his life, he had a wife and a child, and they were involved in a car accident. And during that car accident, his wife actually gave birth to the baby. We do not ever see the baby in one of the panels, but we do get from Stryker that it was visibly a mutant. Stryker, being so horrified by that, immediately killed the child itself, believing it's an abomination of human beings. And then when his wife asks about the child itself and its well-being, he also kills her. I thought this might have been my least favorite part of the story, I have to say, because I think Stryker's backstory, it doesn't need to be like really fleshed out in an extravagant way, but you could have done, I think, a bit more of nuance. This was just very heavy-handed, like, oof, okay, he immediately he sees the child, and once again, we do not know what it looked like, but judging from his immediate response, it was visibly a mutant, the same way that Nightcrawler would be. And yeah, just seeing him explode like that immediately, it was, I mean, it served its purpose fine, but I think it could have been done a bit better. Yeah, and we get something also, a scene that I wasn't such a big fan of, and it's just a minor thing, to be frank, and it clearly communicates what you're supposed to know about Stryker. He has this scene where he cites a verse from the Bible, specifically from the fifth book of Moses, Deuteronomy, where the quote apparently orders from God his minions to kill the foreign people, or like, the wrong kind of people in the land that they were gifted. Of course, I mean, I don't want to turn this into a Bible session, it's just a minor point. But of course, the book of Moses refers to the Israelites, who do not have the same rules as Christians are supposed to have from that Bible today. So implying that a reverend who has been one for 25 years now would even believe that that refers to actual human beings nowadays instead of back in the day the Israelites, was kind of pulling me out a bit, because it felt like, very surface level understanding of Christianity, and I'm by far not a scholar. That's just very basic understanding that I have here. And like I said, it's a small scene. It didn't particularly offend me in any way, but I was just like, you could have done something else. Either maybe just leave that out and put a generic, God wanted me to do this line in there. But I was also somewhat willing to accept that, okay, Stryker is kind of a lunatic at this point. He wouldn't even really be able to particularly say any of these thoughts in a correct way. So I was like, okay, fine, it's a minor thing. As I said, I just felt like it was worth mentioning. Kitty also manages to escape from the henchmen of Stryker in a few very cool panels. She's, going through these shady streets. She's even encountering some like wannabe gangsters, like some homeless people or something. It was a quite fun scene overall. And we also once again get Magneto making his entrance and saving everyone. And as I said, Magneto is just an absolute badass. He also gets help from the other X-Men, notably also here Wolverine. And yeah, as I said, I think Magneto might be my favorite character from the book because he has the most important part to play for me in this book, personally, to say the least. And yeah, we get, Charles is still under captivity from Stryker. And apparently, so what Stryker is doing is he's trying to brainwash him. There's even this little scene, it was before that, where Stryker was appearing to Charles in like a paranoid dream that he had, looking as though he was God. And now Charles was supposedly actually broken and killed Storm and Cyclops, apparently once again. But secretly, we understand later on that he resisted the brainwashing, managed to just stun them so far that the doctors of Stryker would determine them to be dead. But then once again, Magneto and the other X-Men come to the rescue, take the bodies with them, and then also once again Wolverine immediately being able to figure out, wait, they aren't dead. They are clearly alive. I can sense that they are alive. So once again, it's cool to have this mental, of course, the mental aspect of Charles, that is his big part, being his superpower, and to see that in action with so much brainwashing. I mean, once again, it's a pretty short graphic novel, so you kind of have to fill in the blanks a bit time-wise, but you clearly see how strong Charles is, and considering other people would have probably broken far earlier already, that's a very, very admirable thing to see and cool thing to see. Chapter 4, yeah, we get more about Stryker. He even mentions like Mark of the Beast, which is like the most on the nose Christian thing you can say, like, oh, there's evil, something. But I have to say, I liked Stryker. He was a functioning villain. He might be one of the weaker aspects generally, but I think if you just accept that he's kind of a nut job, obviously, and that is really all there's supposed to be about his character, other than kind of representing the heavy distrust for mutants and society, then I can see Stryker working perfectly well, and me not even being that mad about any of those Christian aspects. I mean, yeah, it works fine enough. It does. It does, and Stryker is just kind of babbling nonsense, which is his point. The corpses, apparently quote unquote corpses of Storm and Cyclops, they get carried away. And of course, as I said, Magneto and Wolverine, they save those corpses and the other X-Men. But when the henchmen of Stryker find out and they encourage him to let them search for it, he's like, fine, whatever. It's just corpses. Like, what is there to do? They can't stop my plan anyway anymore. It's like, no. That's like this trope of ignoring this one thing that can actually screw you over. And it would have helped Stryker if he didn't do that in this scene. So yeah, that was kind of like, okay, that's obviously going to be the setup for his eventual failure. Yeah, and Stryker, he holds a speech in Madison Square Garden, and we have Magneto making his entrance through the roof once again, him lifting up, I think, the entire actual roof of Madison Square Garden, which is also just a great picture. And yeah, as I said, as someone who only knows the movies, it is weird seeing Magneto speaking like a sensible person, like, and Stryker being the one trying to attack using Bible verses. That's just, it was kind of a little comedic scene for me. It's like, oh, okay, I did not expect ever seeing that in X-Men content. Once again, just knowing what I know from the movies. Yes, Stryker, he had his henchmen, and he specifically had one kind of main enforcer lady who was an active character throughout the story so far. And what Stryker now has is that he's utilized Charles Xavier's powers to reveal who is a mutant. They are like bleeding from their ears when they actually are mutants. And even the enforcer lady herself, she didn't know that she was a mutant, but that is how she finds out. And now, of course, she's trying to be like, wait, I was always a loyal servant to you. Why please don't do this to me? And he's like, well, you are a mutant. There's no mercy for mutants. And then she gets killed by him in also a pretty, a comparatively violent way. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, that is some form of poetic justice that she just received there. Although I have to say, yeah, seeing her corpse there, it's quite violent. Yeah, it can get quite violent here. And yet, towards the end, we have Wolverine, Cyclops, and Nightcrawler. They are acting together as a team to overwhelm Charles. So what Wolverine and Nightcrawler do is that Nightcrawler uses his teleportation ability to bring Wolverine very close to Charles. Wolverine is trying to attack him, which causes Charles to be distracted by him. He throws him back, of course. And what Cyclops did was shoot one of his lasers that ricochets so many times until it actually manages to hit Charles and let him fall unconscious, which is also, just a small, nice little scene of teamwork. Once again, there's not a lot of story to this book in general. It's a very short, compromised story, but those kinds of scenes with these very, very short but efficient action scenes, I like them. I like them a whole lot. It was a nice little battle there. We have this little fight here where Stryker and Kitty are arguing briefly, where Stryker points to Nightcrawler saying, is this supposed to be what I have to accept as a human? And Kitty defending him, being like, he's more human than you could ever be. It's a nice little short scene here, and it makes Kitty also be a nice character because she's one of the X-Men who got a bit of focus in this story. So I like that little interaction between them. And yeah, before Stryker is able to kill Kitty, he is shot down by one of the police officers. So they had their little build up where they were trying to hold back the masses, who also started to get really aggravated by the mutants being there. And the policemen were actually being reasonable, saying like, hey, what's this guy talking about? He sounds crazy. And who were trying to help the mutants actually. And yeah, before Stryker was able to kill Kitty, he was shot by one of the police officers, which, was a nice little scene there. And then the epilogue, we have Charles being very hopeless about the future of humanity and mutant kind together, which of course is a bit shocking because that is Charles Xavier's big thing. He is the ever peaceful, ever loving optimist who wants to build bridges, who doesn't want fight. And he actually has this moment of trying to get the X-Men to actually join Magneto. Magneto, of course, being one who wants to get control over the entire planet to ensure with force that mutant kind can be left in peace. Of course, probably at the detriment of humanity. And we get Scott arguing back to him, saying like, wait, but we actually are only humans as well. We can't just do the reverse and take control over this planet. We have just special abilities like, let's say doctors or lawyers have special abilities that maybe they can't even change too much about. Of course, sometimes you're born more or less intelligent, and the mutation works in the same way. They are in the end just humans, and trying to separate them into humanity and mutant kind makes no sense to him. And in the end, Charles does decide that he's not gonna surrender the X-Men to Magneto's command. And of course, Magneto leaves them behind. He has his very own idea about how to make sure everything stays peaceful for them. So he's gonna do his own thing further on. and Wolverine says that they are ready to fight, and if there ever comes the need to fight against whomever that might be, they are ready, which is nice. Once again, I mean, Wolverine, he doesn't have a lot going on in this book, but it's nice whenever he does something. And yeah, we get something little just towards the end, where we see Cyclops having a girlfriend that, to me, doesn't look like Jean Grey, which is interesting. I mean, I like Jean Grey, or let's say I have a soft spot for Jean Grey, but yeah, once again, me only knowing the Fox movies, she was not a character that inspired a lot of good storytelling, to say the least. Her interactions and her relationships to Scott and Logan being kind of the center of the movies that she's present in, and two very, very bad Dark Phoenix movies. Yeah, they did not do a whole lot to build up Jean Grey as a great character. So seeing her not be a part of a love triangle is actually kind of refreshing. And overall, this was everything. This is the entire graphic novel of God Loves Man Kills. Obviously, as you can see, it's a relatively short story. I have difficulty really rating it in any way. I guess like 8 or 9 out of 10 might actually be the rating. Maybe to be a bit more fair, let's say like an 8 for now, to say the least. It had some weaknesses, but there was a lot going on here. I liked the tone a lot. It was serious and it treated itself seriously, but it had some little moments that maybe just for me, for lacking a bit of context, seemed a bit humorous. So overall, it was a very consistently well done book. And I was surprised because, obviously it's very short, it's reliant on pictures. But writing down the notes for this work, I actually got to see, oh, there's a lot of information communicated here over just very, very brief paragraphs of text and mostly pictures. And I was surprised how much information is actually carried through that. And it endeared me to the medium a bit more. So, yeah, that is all for today. I am going to start reading the X-Men Epic Collection. So the Claremont run, I'm going to start with Giant Size X-Men #1. I think is the first one that I'm supposed to read. I'm just reading through the Epic Collections. I think Second Genesis is the collection, the name of the collection. And yeah, I would say don't expect too many or too regular updates comic book wise, but I might just throw something uh, in between whenever I have the time. Sometimes it's tough to finish a novel, especially now in Star Wars, where we get to also longer novels. So I will occasionally maybe drop in a Jaded Talk, which deals with comic books, so specifically the X-Men. And yeah, I hope you liked my review. If you have comments to share, please do so. And I'm going to see you next time. Bye bye.